Ladies and gentlemen, the miraculous journey, a day made in heaven. I have the author of a book, Search for My Murdered Sister's Body, Dlana Hall Bodmer, joins me in Dallas, Frisco to be exact. Thank you for joining me in Discussions of Truth, Dlana. Make an introduction, if you would, for yourself to listeners. You're obviously an author.
Well, not really, but I did write a book, 500-page book about truth, and it began really in 1980. I guess if I were to introduce myself, I would share what my murdered sister wrote to me in a letter 2 months before she was killed, and that was, love is never glad about injustice, but rejoices when truth wins out. And it did win out in 1980. Her murderer was one of the very first people in the country convicted of murder with no body ever found. So it became quite a renowned case that set precedents for the system. But for 40 years, we never found Gina's body until just recently. And I did it with perseverance and persistence. And it all began in 2016, which is what this book is about. Is that very first, I like to say God lovingly apprehended me on a journey, and I became drawn back into my sister's case.
You and I both, and this is what you alluded to, you and I both started a similar journey in a similar year.
Yeah. And I think
brought our
it's a bigger picture of light shining in dark. It's been at work for about a decade of God to make sure truth prevails. And I don't think it's just to have found my sister. I think there's a bigger outcome that's going to come from this, and the journey keeps unveiling what that is. It's been quite interesting.
Your sister was murdered in 1980?
Yes, and it was one of those classic, we didn't have anybody, how do you say, I should always say I'm thankful we got the conviction, but the conviction was on a story that the killer actually wrote in his own, And so I've always, my family, for decades, we knew my sister did not go with this man willingly, yet the news that everyone made it out to be that way.
Texas.
In Virginia, in college, university town, kind of a corrupt area in terms of major drug dealing that was going on in the 70s and 80s during that era. And her killer actually was 28 years old when she was 18. And our family, Gina was unique because when she was 2 years old, she was burned severely over the body. She was very conscious about that.
Campfire?
Her pajamas caught on fire when she was 2 years old. She
What?
spent 6 months in the hospital. And from that, she's not a promiscuous girl. She just wasn't. So their story did not fit the character of the girl. But it worked. Boy meets girl, girl goes with boy, and that always bothered my family because we knew she didn't go willingly. We knew she had been taken. Fast forward to now, I have the proof who she was. When I was drawn back into this case in 2016, and I was at peace all those years because, a Christian family knows where I knew my sister was in heaven. So I never really, we never searched, we searched for 6 months, and then we went on to trial because we never found her body. And we won. And we put it to rest. That was the end of all of it. It would come up here and there in the crime type stuff, in the magazines. And our family just tried to put it at rest.
And you're saying this was the first case of
First in Virginia, one of 5 only in the whole country. It was with the California guy that killed
Zodiac?
Nancy.
Oh, it's
Yeah, 1970s. He was one of the 5. So it was up there in terms of set precedents because we had no body. We got a conviction for no body. That's how much circumstantial evidence was found. But she didn't go with him. She didn't go with him. And it led off. What I say now, looking back, is by the truth not coming totally out, the serial killer was not known about. He was made out to be a football player. He just met a girl and she refused him and then he raped and killed her. And that's not the truth.
you said serial.
Yeah, I think he's a serial killer. I know he is. So we fast forward to 2016, and a policeman that was investigating it from the local area called my brother and I in and said, we have a new lead.
This is 2016.
May 2016, because people have been looking for Gina's body. Everybody wanted to find it. Because
Still, all these years later?
all these years, never went away.
In Virginia.
And it affected an entire community of good people. They just, I mean, it's almost got a cult-like following in that area. For many reasons, and I'll share a little of that. But the thing that brought me back into it was this police guy said, we have a family that says that this older gentleman witnessed Gina being dismembered in a creek. And it was 2 men, not 1. So I have a little bit of Eastern Kentucky heritage in me, and I didn't go over very well. So I began working with this policeman, investigator, and he wanted me to go through all the old case files, which was a miracle in itself, that I'm sitting there reading my sister's case file. And I'm seeing all the reports, and I was there in 1980. I lived it. I know what we did. I know how it unfolded this entire summer. And as I'm reading these case files, I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm a businesswoman by trade. And I'm kind of, I've got a pretty good little brain to use. And I'm reading these case files and then I'm seeing what the truth is. It's just as apparent as night and day to me. So, but he wanted to find Gina's body, so looking in the summer of 2016. And the reason I ended up writing this 500-page book was because during that search, it was like no coincidence after no coincidence. And I took this picture that when you zoom in on it, you're like, that's not of this world. It's not. So I ended up sharing my 500-page story of my experience from that summer, what happened, to tell that story in this little box that I have in Norway. I'm not even supposed to read. So the last chapter is about this miraculous journey. But the result of it was that I had kind of a blueprint to begin to continue the search for Gina's body. And I fast forward to 2019 in November, and I met a man named Dr. Arpad Bass. And I researched him. And everything out there in the internet world was against me. But if I dug deep enough, I saw the good. I saw what this man had done. He was a genius before his time. And I've been told that from other policemen that had seen him work, that he was a genius before his time. So he has invented this instrument. So we have DNA that is unique to us. Our fingerprints are unique to us. But we also have a frequency within us. It's unique to each person. And I have to be honest, I went into it like a businesswoman, very skeptical, not trusting at first because I don't know. My heart said he was a good person. But what I saw him do, and I worked with him for over a year, was unbelievable. His instrument can take part of my mother and locate where so what we did, I then began what I call the second part of my journey, which was pretty much digging and excavating sites. And I have retrieved human bones, I've retrieved a bracelet, I've retrieved, we know where my sister was actually and the pattern began to emerge. And one day when the doc and I were out following these leads that his instrument's guiding us to, we hit an area that was a 360-degree positive hit. And he's like, this is impossible. I've never seen this at all but work anywhere. He took, this guy that killed my sister, you think he killed anybody else? I said, no, but I'll find somebody else missing in this area. And I'll get that family's sample. And we'll find out. So I did. Little girl in 1977, 3 years before Gina, disappeared, and they just wrote her off as a hitchhiker, runaway teen. Well, her sample led us to an area very near one of Gina's, to another area near the dismemberment site, and most importantly, inside of the killer's home. And so I brought dogs in. I brought Peace River Canine Rescue dogs from Florida in to confirm all these sites in Gina, to confirm little Angela Rader's sites. And we got into the house. That instrument led us to a place not this big, 2 foot by 2 foot. We asked the owner of the house that owns it now if he would cut the wood floor out. And under the subfloor in this killer of my sister's, where he lived in 1980, in the 70s, there were human bone fragments and bottlenose parts. So fast forward, we put their bones into the instrument, because that's all we have. And we worked backwards and we know where they've been. 3 unidentified females. So, now the storyline about Gina is so much deeper because he was just the mule that ran back and forth. I saw the investigator I was working with in 2016 had a copy of a list of 100 women's names with this Everly had written. Half of them were in Fort Lauderdale. That's the drug trade from the 80s and the 70s. That entire area of Virginia was known big time. But I believe trafficking of women was also involved because of what it was. They and that area that we found is relevant, and somebody needs to step in and help put it all together. I'm just the girl out there trying to find her sister, which I did. I sent soil samples to a lab in California, and that lab has confirmed, based on research papers, you know how when people get published, it's like the bomb when you're a scientist, right? Peer-reviewed publishing. There's a study that says if you take decomposition in the soil, it will release certain chemical compounds if it's human. And the more of those that show up indicate human decomposition in the soil. I sent four little vials of dirt to finally somebody stepped up. Ruby's a serial killer. Truth will prevail for these families. But the bigger picture, I believe, is about this instrument. Because, it's one thing for Dr. Bass to be helping solve cold cases. But what if we use it to even find lost Alzheimer's patients? But my passion is children. And I can see that instrument being used with an army of people in this country, that when a child gets taken, it would be an hour. You'd know if they're within so many miles to get the fine. And you'd get them before they're trafficked, before they're dead, before they're hurt. That's what I think. So the instrument needs to be known about, used, and developed. But I'd say there's a whole bunch of bad people who don't want that instrument to be known about. So against the doctor's battle, spiritual battle. I think it's spiritual warfare. Good tries to prevail, and evil just keeps getting.
What's this cross that you're wearing?
So, after my journey in 2016, and my own experiences, I had actually taken this picture in June of 2016. And I didn't know at the time. It was just crazy to me because you can tell there's two solid balls of light energy that were in the water that made this image. And it formed an image, but I didn't really know in 2016 in June that it was a cross, or in August when the picture was taken that it was a cross. Well, fast forward, because of what I'd experienced in 2016, I had this renewed spiritual growth, just very close to God. Because there's no way to explain it except miracle after miracle. And so then, in June of the next year, I was in Norway with my husband, and I was planning to be with a bunch of our friends, and it fell through. And my husband and I just decided that day on the last swim, let's just get on this little ferry boat and we'll go to Drobik. I was in the hotel lobby and I heard some girls say, I just went to Drobik and it was the nicest place to go. And I thought, well, we'll go. That'd be a good place to spend the day. So my husband and I show up in Drobik, Norway. Not even supposed to be there. And for about a month prior to that, I'd been wanting a new cross. Just because of my new closeness to God. And we were walking through this little village
Did y'all
town,
decide to stay?
and I saw a jewelry store, and I walked past it, and then I walked back, and I went in, and I said, do you have any crosses I'd like to see? And the lady said, we've got one. Her husband was the jeweler, and he handmade everything by hand, one of a kind. And I walked in, and when she pulled this out, I knew it was the exact same shape. It's a very different cross. And this place where I captured that picture, I had dug and dug in 2016 because I knew it was relevant. And I called it the muck place. And this cross has that kind of black color, mucky look to it. And hence I knew that if you look closely at the picture, it's an image of a cross, and it's an image of a little girl's son, a little girl in a dress at the foot of the cross. So I knew there was a bigger purpose for me, and it wasn't a month later, I'm like, oh no, I'm writing a book, because that has to be shared. I can't share it. So I write this book, and then fast forward to the dog days. The dogs confirmed that very same spot. Cadaver. It doesn't mean dogs don't, it doesn't mean there's bones there, but there was decomposition there at the dog alert, and we had 2 different dogs alert on that site. The instrument also was very strong there. So I believe this was 6 miles from where my sister was murdered, and that's where I think he put her about 2 hours. So I think that's where she died. And now we can look back on it and understand and put the pieces together. They say 20/20 hindsight, 20/20. It definitely was. It was clear. So, I like to say that I don't think the good Lord showed me that just for me, but He certainly showed it for someone, for us, to continue this journey. Because that Doc's instrument hit on that spot. It's amazing. I'll show you. When you zoom in on the picture, this picture that I took, there's no words. It's very, that's my beautiful sister. But
She's gorgeous.
she was. When you zoom in on that, you see that? That's on water, or in water.
It's like gold. It's like
It's like
a shine.
energy.
It's a very bright.
Yeah, and that's the image of this around my neck. See that?
And what is this?
Little girl, little dress, little girl.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's amazing. Enough to write a 500-page book about. But I would have never told what I did.
This is in a
what I
river
did.
or a stream.
A little tiny pond, a little tiny gathering place of water. So that's why there's a book, and the journey just keeps. But it wasn't about this. It was part of it. It's very multi-purpose. I met the doctor. I've worked with the dogs. I've found bones. I have soil reports. And now I'm working with a renowned DNA expert who's going to work on what we have retrieved and see if she can prove it's genus. Or at least take the bones from inside the killer's house that we found, because we don't know who these girls are. We know one of them, but we don't know the other 3. One of them signal led us there, for the little 14-year-old from Virginia. But it led to 3 others. They're all different. Now, how do we know there's 4? There was a guy named Art Bohannon that worked the 9/11. He was called in to help identify female versus male from all the tragedy of September 11th. He looked at the bones and told us that, yes, they're all female. How he does it, I don't know. But I've had all these people, everybody wants to still say the doc's not legit. He's taking advantage of poor Dlana. Well, I don't know Dlana to start with. That doesn't happen. And if it is, I've always said, I'll be the first to say it. But he's not preying on me. He's not. He's helping me. He spent over a year with me. No money. It's just I pay for his gas. So there's an actual group of people just, I guess, trying to keep him down because of what this instrument can do. But I've been with him. I've watched him work other things, other cases, I've used it myself. It works. Now, all I can do is say what I've experienced. But the person that recommended him to me was Paul Dotsey, who was known in California for working the Manson murders, and a guy that does work for the History Channel. He's the one that connected all these dots for me and put the doctor in my life. But I'm not the only one that's witnessed it. I would have teams of people helping me on these excavations, and we learned very quickly, rather than sift through all of the dirt looking for bone fragments, we learned to scan. We take it through the dirt and scan. If it's positive, we kept it. If it wasn't, we didn't. So we're looking not only that we already knew Gina, and now we're looking for bones. He can actually scan for generic bones. Caucasian, Hispanic, African American, it's all different. He's brilliant. He's figured it out. That can change the entire. There's 12,000 human bones unidentified in NamUs, the national unidentified bones, and police have found them. They know who they belong to. There's so much potential here.
Is there any question? There's any question that this was not your sister?
Not yet. No, not to me. Because we're talking about.
You've proven this through DNA bone
We're
fragment?
going to. We're at that point right now. This doctor that I talked to, she's in Connecticut. I met her when I went up for the birth of my third grandson, and we visited about 4 hours. And she said, "Yes, I'll take this. I'll do this for you." So she's the best. I'm going to wait on her till she can do it, and she's supposed to do it by this summer. So I'm patient. I mean,
And at that point,
yeah, if it can be said, yes, that's Gina Halls, then nobody can argue. But even if it just says it's human,
yeah.
how did we find it on a mountain? I mean, I'm talking a mountain that's. The last place we excavated is called the Steep Place by locals. It was about 6 miles from the Dismemberment Creek, and it was a local dump site where people used to just drive cars over and nobody could get them out. That's how steep. And it was very dangerous to excavate. I actually had 3 police friends from my local town that helped us on the first excavation of that site, and they're the ones that pulled the bracelet out from about 2 to 4 feet in the dirt where we were excavating. And the instrument identified it first, but then I brought the dogs in, turned it loose on that mountain, and the dogs confirmed the same spot. So that's why we excavate. Don't need the dogs, but it just gave more validation to the doctor's instrument. But at this point, I've excavated 4 of these sites. And that's all I'm going to do, because this last site was the majority of the bone. It's not like you go and you dig after 40-some years and find an entire skeleton somewhere. I met with an anthropologist team in Tennessee, and they alluded that it looked like burned bone. So I told the DNA lady when I met with her, they think this might be burned bone. And she looked at it. I took my little suitcase of what I have to Connecticut and showed her. And she said, yeah. So that puts a whole new twist on this guy. I mean, this was a pattern. We've got other girls showing up in the same places. I always say when I read Gina's case file, I saw things that should have come up. Other girls that were inside the Nance area. And things that just should have come up. And if you look at some of the facts that have come up, there's no doubt she was a dummy. Well, I put the doc in the car, I call him Doc, in my truck, and I'm driving to go check another place out from one of those connected people that were involved in 1980. I just wanted to have the doc scan where he lived, just in case. Well, on the way there, that instrument went off. And I'm really? Well, it was 6 miles from the place where she was supposedly left with this fellow that night. 6 miles away. She showed up. That showed me where she was abducted from. Things like the inside car strap in my door in my car was broken where she had held it with all her might. But that never got. It didn't intentionally end up in the court case, but it came out. Because the ones that found the car said they'd never forget seeing that. So things came up, even in my own court testimony. I was very clear. I didn't say she went with Steve Evelyn. I just said one word, Steve, when she gave us. She'd made a phone call that night. Well, what happens is everybody twists it into their own minds to turn it into the story they want it to fit in, and if it doesn't fit that narrative, stuff gets thrown out. And that's what happened. If it didn't fit in the narrative, it didn't end up in that court case. And it's a problem too because she has such a following. As I was writing this book, there's another guy writing a book very quickly. Errors, lots of errors. I had to get an attorney to stop him from using her name, the Hall name, in his marketing. But my attorney told me I can't make people write true. Even I could have done it for my own self when he misquoted me. But he can say whatever he wants. So he wrote a page in his book that I believe is victim blaming. He writes, nobody knows. Even in the case files, you can put it together. But nobody should be able to say that she walked across the floor and caught the eye of his raw instincts. And like it was her dancing that caused him to pick her out of that crowd. He shouldn't be allowed to write something like that about her. But he did. And now a documentary's even being made. And I'm like, what are you going to do? Show my sister? Coming into this nightclub like it's wrong. It's just wrong, and I don't have any way to stop it.
Why is this person doing this? Why is he writing this information?
People make money. It's a big deal in that part of Virginia. People, it never went away. But really now I know why it didn't go away. It's got to come out. Regina's voice was never heard. And it needed to be heard. So I'm her sister and I'm her voice.
You link Fort Lauderdale to this and the drug trade to this. What's some other information that you can share with listeners in regards to the drug trade in this?
Well, the prosecuting attorney on Gina's case told me point blank. He said this was one of the largest drug trafficking areas. He constantly was prosecuting for that. You also had a very large, well-known person that lived in that area the same author that I'm upset about wrote a book about him. His next book was about a guy named Wally Thrasher, who was a humongous drug trader from South America back. During my journey, I met with a fella that actually went in witness protection. He was part of Vegan motorcycle guys.
So you're saying there's a cover-up of...
I always say this one question. When I was there in 1980, my dad and I stayed. We searched the woods, we climbed, we looked everywhere for my sister. Because we didn't think we could get a prosecution without a body. So, hundreds of people were looking for Gina, hundreds of policemen, the community members. It brought a community together, and we all looked for Gina. I'll never forget this police type people came in, and they said, they called in the federal government came into Bradford, their special team. I know now what that special team was, but
Which agency?
We didn't really know in 1980, but why would federal agency of any kind come in and work a little college girl's case? I always said that. Well, when in 2016, that police officer introduced me to a fella that said he was the guy that brought him in. And he gave the background. And it came out of Stanford University and was a side program that the government did called Mind Reach. Remote viewing stuff that the government did. So what agency would that be? All I know is what I experienced in 1981 and 80, and it was probably right around in the fall-ish. Like they were getting desperate. You know, they couldn't find Gina. Do we prosecute the guy or not? I believe Epperly killed 2 other people before we even got him back in jail. You know, or before we even charged him for Gina's murder. But didn't know that for sure then. But you can see it clearly now. In rural Virginia, 2 people don't die within 24 hours. There's another guy that died out on 81, Interstate 81, that as we were finding my car, they were working that case, that discovery of the execution-style murder, and they just blamed it on drug dealing. But this is small-town America. 2 murders in 24 hours. He must have known or saw, knew whatever happened. And then it was June the 29th when Gina went out and missing. And it was not until September the 9th or so, whatever that date was, that he got charged. And then the trial wasn't until December of that year. Well, in August, a young lady was murdered in Ohio. Guess who was up there? It's in the cold case files. I mean, it's in the police files. They're communicating with each other, Ohio and Virginia, about him being there. Well, we knew it because we were there, and my dad was heartbroken when he learned that another girl had been killed in Ohio. He raised the reward for Gina's body at that point, trying to get close, trying to find us so we could just prosecute. But the prosecutor was a young, new attorney, and he went after him. He didn't back off, and that was good too. So we won the trial in December, and he went to jail for life, but that was pre-parole. So he comes up for parole every 1 to 3 years. So I spent many years of my life fighting to keep him in jail because I was worried about our family. My family, and then my children, and my you just work. You fight to keep them in jail. And now we've got 2 paroles. You got geriatric and you got your regular. This is over. Plus it's in Virginia. So, it kind of escalates my timeline that I've given the information to parole boards, and that we keep finding, but it's not like a new charge. But it should be. People should be investigating and finding the connections. Like his list of 100 women's names. And if you didn't know their name, he just described them. Like, really not nice terms, but obviously, I think it was a ledger. I don't think it's his, most the policemen and other men that knew about it said, oh, it's just his sex list or his woman's list. No, it's a ledger. I always say, if a guy is dealing drugs down in the South, well, let's go back to this man's history, Wally Thrasher. He ends up in a Mexican jail, but he ends up out. He ends up hobnobbing with lots of, elbowing with lots of elite people. And he ends up known for his drug trade. He flew a plane and then he'd come back. The locals used to rent their fields to him, and he would do his drops there. I've met him. He told me that.
Drops of what?
Drops of drugs. I don't know what kind. I guess marijuana, because when he had his final crash, they say that he died in a second crash, down in Belize or something. But I mean, it's just a web. That story alone's a whole different story. But what I want to know is, when I got to digging into it deeper, I connected him to Epperly. So I believe Epperly was his back and forth to Fort Lauderdale for him. He's the top of the pyramid. So who gets out of a Mexican jail? Who keeps evading, justice? And he was thought of kind of like a Robin Hood in that area. I'm like, no. How do you go in and out of South American countries and not and with ease? A couple of girls would make that pretty easy, wouldn't it? Possible. It's just a theory. I don't have proof on that. But I do have proof of their connection to one another. So I don't know. It's a web of evil. I have a second book that I had written at the same time as this one. I had to pull it out because my book was so big. So I pulled all the facts out. This is about my journey and my spiritual, all things good. This is a day made in heaven. The second book was called, basically a day made in hell. Truth unveiled. And I was going to do just the facts. All the facts that I saw in the cold case file and how I put it all together. Or in the police files. I mean, there were 5 binders that thick. It was huge investigation. And I learned so much going through that. Well, if you fast forward again to now, if I released that book, I didn't release it because it was like 80% finished, and something in my gut said, no, not yet. There's something missing. Well, the doc showed me what it was the day he hit 360. There's a pattern to where these girls were taken and where they ended up buried from the ones. And so then you start to say, okay, who really was involved in this area, doing whatever they were doing? Hunting grounds. There's a lot of truth there. So I haven't released that. And if I had my druthers, I would write another journey book. I'd write another miracle book, because it's been one miracle after another since then to get me to where I am now. It's just like meeting you. I didn't plan this today. I'm walking down the hall. Met this nice girl. She said, you need to meet him. That's God. That's God moving us like chess pieces to get to an end game. And that's to show us just how, what the DNA expert told me. She said, Dlana, she said, I've been doing this stuff a long time. She said, what seems to be in the trafficking world of women, not drugs too, I'm sure, but children, women trafficking is this generational. It doesn't end. She said if it was there in 1980, it's still there. Whoever was in the top of that pyramid, she said maybe that's why we're doing this. I don't know the answer. I just take each day as it comes, trust, and figure that it'll come when it's supposed to come. I keep being my sister's voice and screaming to those folks that want to make money off of her tragedy or anyone else's tragedy that it's wrong, Because if you don't tell the truth, which is she didn't go willingly, you let the killer win. He's still sitting in jail laughing because we're all out here like, he's still got the card. He thinks he does in his own mind. But now that we've found Gina, if I could just meet him and tell him, I did forgive him in 2016. That was part of the journey, was coming to a forgiveness of that man. It's even harder, though, to forgive the ones that continue to spin the lies. Those are harder. He's a sick guy, you know? They're not. They're just arrogant and prideful, and people shouldn't do that.
Something that catches my interest, something that's I've found interesting is this. Let's say it's the FBI, right? Out of the Hoover Institute, J. Edgar Hoover, the former FBI director, Stanford, talking about, and what caught my attention here is you've drawn a parallel as well, or you've associated somehow with what this Charles Manson group had done, and not knowing much about that, but I have heard the critique about elements of the U.S. government being involved in this. On the other end of the side of the coast, Virginia and Florida, like you're suggesting.
How do you get in and out of those countries with those drugs so easily? You don't make him into a hero. I think that's what's that 100 list about? Who gets those girls for him? If they did traffic drugs. I don't know. It'll come. I mean, there's definite connection. The land where Gina, the creek, where the dismemberment was witnessed, and where the dogs have confirmed, and where the soul has now been confirmed, and where the tiny bone fragments were retrieved there, tiny. And Angela was up creek, about a quarter mile. We got all these pictures. Well, the land that borders that creek was owned by Epperly's family. Not his family immediate, but, part of his relatives. Well, I kept thinking, well, how's Thrasher connect to Epperly? How? He would have been older. Well, I found, or a friend helped me, the History Channel guy helped me find a tiny little obituary of the matriarch of that land. My grandma, when she died, guess who pallbearer was? Wally Thrasher. Right there's your connection to that land and that family. Big time hunters. Big time hunters. We're not talking just Virginia hunters. We're talking serious hunters. The three girls from the subfloor, the three unidentified, one was an African American, and her trail led us to a place where part of Gina was buried. But no one else was buried up there. So Epperly took part of Gina back there for some kind of ritualistic reason. But those dogs, when we took them there, hit on 5 different places within, the size of. You're like, what happened here? What happened? So you follow those girls' trails, and you're ending up in hunting grounds that cover probably 125-mile radius. Don't know yet, for sure. Somebody knows. Somebody knows from 1980, 1970s. The way that I can validate one of Epperly's cellmates came forward after he got out of jail and told Bradford police that And it had nothing to do with anything except I just connected to why we probably found fragments in the house, is he bragged that he kept Gina's finger, which may be why we have so much blood showing up at the place there, but where she had bled out. But those bones probably came from, he told on himself. I mean, that's in Radford records, police records. And I met the lady who took the report too. And she confirmed it. So that's, so, yeah, he bragged that he kept Gina's finger. Well, it wasn't Gina's bones in that house. It was 4 other girls, Angela and 3 unidentified. And his amazing instrument helped me trace those girls to places I could have never found, just like Gina. I mean, you can't zero in on a place the size this big and retrieve human bones. You know, you just can't. And a bracelet, tiny little wrist would have worn that bracelet like my sister. And the instrument took us to that spot. That's what's amazing. You got a mountain, you know, an absolute mountain. Ridges in the middle. I mean, if I weren't a pretty tough woman, I could have never done it. There's men that would have done what we did. So, why would he be taking advantage of me when most men would go to the places and we ended up having to go? I have a picture of the very first place we excavated that is in that general hunting ground where those girls, I believe those 3 of those girls are buried on the same land. Big farms. We're talking big hunting grounds, not like flat farms. This is rolling Virginia, hill, mountains, woods. But when we went to that excavation site, there's, you know, I researched certain kinds of fabric don't decompose for a long, long, long time. Nylon's one of those. On the post at the entrance, like an old road, there was old nylon panties hanging on the fence. It's a miracle I even saw. I looked over there and I was like, what is that? I took a picture. I documented every step I've made with tons of pictures and facts. I have other people that have them in case something happens to me. Because there's something big that went on there. Something that just is not good for women. And if it was women then, which Gina in my mind is not a woman, she was a child. She was a teen. Angela was 14 years old in 1977. So what are they doing now? If it's still going on. Is it a dumping ground for DC? It's on the outside, you know, it's probably 4 hours from DC. What is it? What's there? You know? Who do you work for? Definitely didn't do this on his own. You don't go to Fort Lauderdale 50 trips. So, yeah, he's a serial killer, and it just keeps getting shoved under the rug. And until I can prove the dog 100%, I can't, you know, I'll use Gina's light. I call it her light, still shining. And that dog is voice saying the truth. Let's get it out there. Let's get that out. If that instrument can do what I've seen it do, and it really can be utilized for good, why would we not? You know, why would we not? I mean, if a child went missing in my town, all I'd have to do is go to the mom and say, "Give me this. Give me your sample. Let me scan. I go to the tallest mountain nearby. I just scan and follow the trail. Boom, 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 till I get to it. It wasn't that hard. It was hard to dig. It was hard to get in some of these places, but it wasn't that hard to solve. It just wasn't. So my hope is that's God's bigger purpose. I don't really know, but if it is, I'll do everything I can to help this man and his instrument. He calls it the quantum oscillator. And people want to beat him down, because you know how it is. Bad always tries to knock down good. It's been like that since the beginning. Well, I'm not afraid. So you truly realize this is just the dot in our life, and we have an eternal life, then there's nothing they can, it's just the way it is. I'll keep shouting. I'll keep writing. And I'll keep taking the no coincidences as they come and trusting God. That makes sense.
Glenda, thank you very much for the work that you do. I'd like to give you the opportunity to give some closing thoughts and comments for listeners. But before you do that, please tell them where they can find your work, website, social media, the Twitter, any type of outlets that they can get more information on you further.
Well, I've documented the journey on themiraculousjourney.com. I have a Facebook page that most of the locals follow up in that area. I live about 2 hours now from where all that happened. And there's a lot of people they've had closure, women that have been healed. It's like God put me, I feel like a Facebook preacher sometimes, but I just talk about what comes to my heart, and it never fails. It's always someone that needed to hear it. And it's those people that follow the story that are in that circle, in that Facebook page. So I have 2. I have my personal Facebook page, and I have The Miraculous Journey, Gina Renee Hall. When I didn't release the second book, I did a YouTube channel, and I just gave all the facts, because I don't want to make money doing this. I just put it all out there, and I just gave all the facts that I read from the case files in about, 13, 14 videos. The most recent one, I gave the lab reports, and tried to say, if you really think about it, how do we have all these people in? Everybody wants to say, no way. How do you have an epidemiologist that confirms the bodies, an anthropologist team, Hannon, a doctor, soil reports, bones found, witnesses that have watched all the excavations and helped us, not a lot, but enough, different ones that I've used. Police that pull a bracelet out of the ground, right where we know Gina landed off that steep place. It's on and on. And at some point somebody should back up and say, wow, that's a lot. Maybe somebody should start connecting the dots and figure out he was a serial killer and help these other families. So I guess, I try to document all that because I didn't get the support from officials. So I just put it out to the public. What do I have to lose? So I put, I did a YouTube channel, The Truth About Gina Hall, or The True Story, The True Story of Gina Hall. And I add to it on occasion. And people can only buy my book through my website or eBay, because if you go to Amazon, they want to sell it for $200. The pirates were, and I just said, no, this is about God. I'm not letting it get, And I self-published it because I didn't want anybody to tell me what I could say and what I couldn't say. So I funded it and put it out there. It's it's for Gina. Everything's for Gina. I don't need it. I'm a successful businesswoman. I don't, you know. And now it's the doctor too. Dr. Bass deserves to be recognized for this brilliant mind that was able to figure this out. Maybe it's God inspired. I don't know. All I know is what I've seen, and you can't argue that I can end up on a doggone mountain and go to the right spot and dig up and retrieve human body. And if we can extract DNA that confirms Gina's profile, I even found my lost mother during this. I hadn't had my mother for 50 years and found her. So that we now have her DNA to use. See, that's the miracles. This is a God inspired
Your
journey.
lost mother.
Yeah, my mother was taken from me when I was 5 years old. It's amazing. Since 2016, everything is about something coming, and so I guess I would end on that. I trust God, I trust His plan, and I know that He's unveiling evil everywhere. That's what we're doing here. So, what is it though? I don't question. I just keep. So what I learned, I could write 4 more books, I guess, if I want to. If I do, I don't. It's okay with me. I'm 62 years old,
Well, Dlana, mate, thank you very much for joining the program, and I look forward to hearing more of the work that you've done.
So I'm going to leave on this. This is, I always quote Jeremiah 33:3 because when they told me they had dismembered my sister, I went home and I went on my knees and I called to God. And that verse tells me that when you do fall, He will show you what you do not know. And that is exactly what happened. So, all's good. All's good.
Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. And thanks for the water.